I'm Lovern Kindzierski, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's August 6, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Lovern Kindzierski about his Shane comic book series and more. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Lovern is a Canadian colorist and writer born in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree with honors, and his paintings have been exhibited in solo and group exhibitions. After receiving his degree from the University of Manitoba, he worked as a courtroom sketch artist and contributed to animation on the Children's Television Workshop, both as an employee of CBC Television. Lovern broke into comics as a colorist of John Constantine Hellblazer. He's known for his work with DC Comics, Marvel Comics, Dark Horse Comics, including Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology series, and more. He's been nominated several times as Best Colorist for both the Eisner and Harvey Awards, has won 2 Wizard Fan Awards for his work, along with 1 Comic Buyers Fan Award. Lovern is the co-founder of Digital Chameleon and introduced computers to comic book production, which changed the standards of comic production and color forever. Lovern has been recognized by the Comic Buyer's Guide survey as one of the comics' most influential colorists of all time. His current project with artist John Bolton is Shame for Renegade Arts Entertainment. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Lovern Kindzierski about his Shame comic book series, his time with Digital Chameleon, and more. So, Lovern Kindzierski, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, you're welcome, John.
I appreciate your time. What I normally do to start off the interview is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
I'm guessing it was The Phantom, because that's the one I remember. I remember reading The Phantom when I was very, very, I think my memory seems to go back to about when I was 4 or 5. So I remember The Phantom pretty clearly. I'm sure there were others. I had my father was a comic book lover, and apparently he would on the Saturdays when he had his time off. I think he worked. Well, he was a truck driver, so some Saturday mornings he would have worked, some not. But apparently he would put me on his shoulders like Scrooge with Tiny Tim, and he would walk down to the local drugstore and go in, and back then they had those amazing, rows and rows of magazines and comics, and he would pick out the ones he liked, and then he would go take me back home, and he would sit down, actually not on the couch, but on the floor. And he would sit me not on the floor in front of him and curl his legs around so I wouldn't get away. And then he would hold the comic books up so I could see them, and he would read them to me.
Wow, that's cool.
Now, I have no memory of it, but I've been told that was a thing he did.
There you go. Wow, that's good stuff. Was that Lee Falk that did the Phantom?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. My brain is a little fuzzy and sometimes, but that's definitely a great pulp hero to inspire people. But I'm wondering, who or what inspires you to create today?
Today? Oh, there's such a barrage of so many types of media in that. But I find that that ideas will pop into my head, and sometimes it's like a full-formed story, and sometimes it's a scene, and I don't know exactly where they've come from in probably half of the cases. In other ones, I'm inspired by maybe seeing something in a movie and thinking, like say there's a background character who is, like sweeps through the movie and he's gone, and I'm thinking that guy would be interesting because if, and then I start doing the what if questions to myself.
Right.
And yeah, so I mean, so it's a bunch of things.
Sure. Well, I want to talk about tonight your latest project, Hell's Flaw from Renegade. And I wonder if you could talk a wee bit about it, maybe for those who are not familiar with the story.
Well, Hell's Flaw is the fifth book in a series that's a long story that I've been writing about this character called Shame, as in shame on you, not Shane the Western.
Right. Yes.
And so Hell's Flaw was, like if you had been following the book, it's just the next chapter, but I tried to write each of them so that you would enjoy just reading it from as a one shot, like so that you don't have to get number one to understand it and that. But I know that perhaps I'm not always successful at doing that because I have to serve the needs of the ongoing narrative. So Hell's Flaw is basically where the character now has sort of gone into the background, and we're dealing more with her daughter, Hope, and how Hope is basically learning how to live in the world, but she's not allowed to be growing up a normal childhood because she's swept up in the battle that her mother started a long time ago, where they're trying to. Originally, it was her mother trying to escape from a prison that her mother put her in, because Shame is not a good person. Shame is evil.
Okay.
And so when. Boy, I don't know how many spoilers I should be giving away.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't want to get too deep in the weeds, but it sounds like it's a mother-daughter conflict that continues on for.
Oh yeah, it's mother, daughter. So it's like so there's a grandmother in there, but the grandmother was actually the daughter of the mother at one point. If that's
my goodness.
Confusing. But sure. It's magic. It's magic. They're witches and witchcraft. And
very good.
It's a grown-up fairy tale.
Okay, sure. Now you're working with John Bolton as the artist on this project, and I was first introduced to John Bolton's work in the Books of Magic. But I'm wondering, how did you first meet up with John?
Oh, years ago in San Diego, he was a guest there, and I immediately, when you go to the convention, you have a list of, I'd like to see all of these people, but I have to see this person. And so, right. I went to John's table, and he wasn't there, and I was like, ag. But I talked to his wife for a little bit, and then came back again, missed him again. And I think the third time I got there and he was there, and his wife was able to introduce us and that. So I met him there, but I had been following John's work since his, actually his first work of his that I saw wasn't in comic books. It was in a book teaching you how to play chess.
Oh, wow.
And it was his paintings, his early paintings, and when you look at his really early work there, you can see how strongly he was influenced by Frazetta.
Oh, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's it's that fantasy sort of work, but with John's flavor. I mean, I would never mistake it for Frazetta, but I could see the influence.
Sure.
And then when he went into comics, it was like, all right. And I got into all the Murata stuff, and I loved his all of his portrayals of the Robert E. Howard characters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and then later the Black Dragon.
Okay. And then I guess at one point you said, well, let's get something on paper. Let's try to put a book together. I guess that's how it worked out.
He was my dream choice.
Oh wow!
I had come up with the story and worked it out so that I was putting together the pitch, and I thought it would be better if I could find the artist before I put the pitch together, and that because this was early. I hadn't had a lot of stuff published then of my writing. I had a lot of color work published, but not the writing.
Right.
And so I used my connection to get his number because I foolishly didn't get good contact information when I met him in San Diego. But I called him up, and this was back when phone calls cost a fortune overseas.
Yeah.
And so I called him up, reminded him who I was, and he remembered, which was good. And then I told him that I was interested in him doing the story, and he immediately was like, "Oh no," and he started to say, "Well, I'm very busy and I'm working, far ahead." And I said, "Oh yeah, this is just something that I'd like to see if you're interested in, and if that way we can, when you have the time, we can put a pitch together, and because you're my dream artist on this." And we talked about his work on oh God, what was her name now? It was a Christina Rossetti story that he did for Epic Illustrated.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it was called Goblin Market, and we talked about how that looked and that. And he said, "Well, I would like to, depending on your story, I might not want to do it that way. And I've moved a little bit away from that. How are you at how I'm doing it?" And I said, "I love everything you do. So I think you would know what's more appropriate for how you want your story to look."
Right.
And
right.
Told him about the story, and he was, he loved it immediately. He said it put him in mind of, what was his name? Mervyn Peake, I believe, who did Gormenghast. Huh. And so we were off to the races, and we pitched it around. And once I guess it was the next year, because he was working on I'm not sure if he was working on Man-Bat. I think it may have been
okay.
done already.
Yeah.
But he was working on some stuff. He finished that up. We pitched it. We had a bunch of no's. And then Dark Horse said they liked it, and we started putting it together, and they wanted it to be this was like 20 years before the book came out, and they dictated how they wanted it, what format, and so I readjusted the story for that. But then everything fell through, and it didn't happen, and I think I pitched it to a few other places, and then John got busy with other stuff, and it just got put on a shelf for a long time until Renegade.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they were hiring me for a graphic novel on the War of 1812.
Yes.
To do the color on that.
Right.
And I said, I talked to the artist who was illustrating a story that Alexander Finbow was writing, and Al Davison, and he said you should pitch, because he knew about the stuff, because we talked occasionally, and he said you should pitch them the Shame story.
Oh, okay.
So when I pitched it to Alexander, he was like, uh-oh, because he wanted me to do the color, but he was like, he wasn't looking for other work to publish.
Right.
And so he was very polite and very professional, and said, "Well, you can pitch me it. I can't make any guarantees." And I said, "Well, that's great." So I pitched it to him, and he was like in love with it right away. And he said, "I love the story." And he said, "And John Bolton's going to paint it." Wow. And so away it went.
There you go. Good stuff. I'm glad it all worked out for you. For sure. For sure.
Me too.
Yeah. I want to switch gears completely now and take you way back because you were the co-founder of Digital Chameleon back in 1991.
Yeah,
And
my cousin Christopher and I.
and for those folks, like some very memorable books, like you'd see Digital Chameleon popping up all over the place, and you go, "Who is that? What is that group?" But I tell you, very influential. And what I remember is that you introduced Adobe Photoshop to the industry. That was one of the things. Not only did you produce great comic books, but you helped in sort of inspire others, I think, to take that on. So just want to, I know that was many years ago, but looking back, what are your thoughts about that time period of dealing with technology? Was it really like stone knives and bearskins trying to put comic books together?
Well, not quite, but it was very. It was done in a really old manner, very, very cheaply, and they were originally looking back at the days of the old rotogravure letter presses and stuff like that, and some comics were still printed that way, and so the technology was archaic. Compared to what we were pushing for, and we actually when we came out, we were both just out of university, so we had we had no money.
Oh wow!
So we were looking at the costs of putting it together, and we just we went out and we talked to banks and we talked to the government, and everybody was just like, oh, that sounds like a wonderful deal. Go away.
Comic books, I guess, weren't highly regarded back then.
I think the thing, in retrospect, the thing that that killed us every time was that we would go into the meeting and they would say, okay, so this is the first time this is being done in Winnipeg. And we would explain to them that no, this has never been done anywhere before. And I think when they heard that, they went, they pulled out their crucifixes and holy water, and got us out of the office as quickly as they could. They wanted to hear about, like, those kind of investment places wanted to hear about, oh, I'm opening a restaurant and or I'm opening a KFC franchise. That's what they wanted to do, because they wanted to know that there was a well-established route to profits.
So what was the turning point then? What made them change their mind?
They didn't.
Oh,
none of them did. We even approached DC Comics about funding us, and we had Christopher had a business background, so we had advice from some people we knew, and we put together a really comprehensive proposal, and we gave it to DC, and Paul Levitz gave it to the people that he depended on for doing that kind of analyzing that sort of things, and Paul came back, and Paul was very supportive in that, but he said, my people tell me that this can't work.
Oh,
and so we ended up going to less reputable places. Basically, we looked for some, I guess now they're called sharks, but they were, investors that were,
not reputable, I guess.
Well, no, they were reputable, but you had to watch yourself, because they were in it to make big money right away, and the things that they wanted, you weren't going to go in there and expect a supportive what's the word? Well, I mean, they were basically looking at us as cash cows.
Right.
And we had to really prove to them that, and they actually looked at the stuff, and one of them had been working with a printing firm and they had actually been involved on the Captain Canuck comic.
Oh, okay, right.
And so because he saw that the money that the Captain Canuck comic had made in that, he thought twice about it, and he said, it could work.
Mhm.
And he convinced his partner, and they put the money up for it. And they said, you got 3 months, make it work.
Wow.
And so we had offices set up in the building with the company that they own. I'm not sure half of, or maybe more. I'm not sure, but it was another graphic design company that was in there. And so we went in and we used all of their equipment, but we bought a brand new computer in that later. But we were using the Dash 2FX, which was the Mac that we were using for.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was so slow.
Oh.
When I was first doing all of the, I was working on screen, doing the color and figuring it out with some help from the tech guys at the graphic design company. And I would set up colors on a panel, like you have a 6-panel page. I would set up just flat color with a couple of graduations in the background. And then I would hit save, and I would walk down the hall, go to the washroom.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Go into the coffee room.
Yeah.
Make myself a coffee, come back, sit down, and have a cookie while I was watching the thing still going across. And then it would have saved. So then I could do the next panel.
Yeah, kids today don't appreciate what we went through.
Oh, it was so slow. And basically, I guess 2 months in, we realized, like we had back then we had to generate our own film. So we were using the machine that the design firm had to run our film off, and we were piggybacking some of our stuff on other printing jobs that were going through that company.
Right.
And we saw that it was printing well. I mean, the first couple of times it was not printing well, but we found out what the mistakes are and we adjusted for it and that. But after 2 months, we realized that the computers just aren't fast enough to deal with the size of these files to do a monthly book. And we were like, like we weren't talking to the investors yet, but Chris and I were like going out for late night coffees and going, I don't know what we're going to do. Do we split it up and break the page up? And we were like at our wits' end. And then a company came out, and I believe they were called 68,000. And they were some guys that jumped ship from Apple, and they had started their own computer company, and they did the first tower.
Oh, okay.
And so we looked at that, and we had to go back to the investors, and we got them to come. And we were lucky that there was an Apple store or a shop that was handling Apple stuff, and they had one of the towers in there, and they were showing it off. And we got in after hours, and they did a little demo. We took some files and did a little change and hit save, and we actually saw the bar go across and beep.
Wow!
And we were like, "Holy, this is it!" And so we had to convince them to buy one. But once we knew that, they went out and we bought 2 towers and monitors. And we had to buy, because the monitors were so huge then, and we wanted the biggest monitor we could get for the art stuff, we had to buy these tubular steel desks to hold all the stuff and still work on it. And so, the desks and the tower and the monitors, and we had an 1117 flatbed scanner, which was brand new then.
Yep.
And and all of that. I think it costs. I think it was like nearly $70,000.
Yep, that's what it cost back then.
Yeah, for two computers and two monitors and a scanner.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it wasn't cheap.
It was. So that's why we had the investors, because we didn't have that kind of money.
No.
So we had them, and I think at one point we had people that were other designers that were coming to get work done at that design center. They would come over. Like, we would have people regularly invading our office to just watch the redraw on the screen.
Sure.
They couldn't believe it. And they were like, and the file's how big? And, according to what we handle today, the files were tiny.
Yeah. That's tremendous. It's amazing back then how far we've come. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, my first Macintosh was a Fat Mac. Do you know what that is?
The Fat. I've probably seen it. I just can't picture it right now.
It was about, I guess, about 8 inches square and about, 16 inches high. And the monitor was a little 6-inch square monitor.
Oh my!
Wow. And that's what I got to play with at the university when I was doing my graphic design course there.
Oh, wow!
It was for doing graphics. It was garbage, except that I realized that there were several fonts in there, and I could do my own typesetting, and then paste it up the old method, which was you printed out the paper and then you waxed it and attached it to the comic board you were drawing on. And so I could do my own typesetting like that, and I didn't have to go to a typesetter to pay them, upwards of $90 an hour to set the copy for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember actually when I was doing newspaper back in college, and literally have to print it, cut it, and paste it on a board.
Oh yeah, that was my first graphic design job. I was doing design and layout for a couple of for a company that put out business magazines.
Oh, okay.
And you would come in the morning and you could smell all of the typeset stuff because it had gone through that photochemical process, and they were drying.
Yeah.
And then I would come in and they'd be all dry, and I'd put them through the wax machine, and then I would get out these boards that had the blue lined indications, and we had to trim it and make sure the layout worked, and then sometimes we had a typesetter that worked in the companies, because sometimes you would have to get it redone, or you thought that 72 point headline would look good, but now it's like way too big. And,
right.
Yeah, it was. I was very, very fast with an X-Acto knife. So
yes,
that was one of the things you had to be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So when I got into comics and that, and I was first doing blue line work, I was doing a lot of airbrush, and when you're airbrushing, you're cutting frisket in that. So my speed helped a lot for for translating those pages.
That's tremendous. I mean, we've certainly come a long way. That's for sure. And the tools have certainly changed too. That's for sure.
Yeah, but I do miss it from time to time.
Yeah, I know. Getting your hands dirty, I guess that's something.
Yeah,
for sure. Want to switch gears? I listened to a recent interview that you did when someone was asking about advice for up and coming people who want to make their own books for beginners, and you said this phrase that you recommended that creators start making your mistakes, and I'm wondering what you meant by that.
I meant that I think if you don't make mistakes and don't realize that mistakes, that you don't learn anything.
Okay.
And it kind of ties in with that. I don't know if you've heard of the idea of the that if you want to be a professional, guitar player or artist, that you need to put in 10,000 hours to master your craft. but I've also heard that you have to, and that 10,000 hours is basically making a whole hell of a lot of mistakes
Right.
and learning from it.
Sure.
So that's why I was saying, you need to go out there and make the mistakes,
Yeah.
and realize that, that you're not a brush artist, or that you're not a pen artist, or what have you. And now with digital, it's a little bit easier,
Mm-hmm.
but you also go through there and you find out what your style is, and you realize that maybe it's more graphic than you want it to be. Maybe you want it to be Gene Colan, but your hand wants to draw like Alex Toth or Toth.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
So you need to go out there, make those mistakes, and do your bad comic book, and go, you know what, this is really crappy, but I know now that I can really do backgrounds really well using this technique or that. So you make the mistakes and cross them off, and come up with your style in that.
Oh, good advice. That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, we've talked about Hell's Flaw as the latest chapter in the Shame series. I'm wondering if you have any other projects on the go that you can talk about that are up and coming.
Well, I actually just saw John the way we work on together, John and I, is kind of the similar to the old Marvel method, where you do the plot, give that to the artist, they draw it, and then you dialogue it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not, like, I've seen some of the plots from books when I was first starting out doing the old method of that, and in some cases a whole comic book might be one typed page from the writer, and everything else is put in by the artist, and then you do the dialogue after that. Mm-hmm. I'm slightly different than that. I work out the plot and I work it down page by page rather than just a synopsis.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I've worked that all out, and I count, I say this page and that page, and I send it off to John, and then he goes through it and he goes, okay, this is working really well. This here should be, this can be one page. It doesn't have to be two. Mm-hmm. Or he looks at a panel and thinks, oh no, this could be a page all by itself. And if we go for a splash, then he then goes through that and he does thumbnails, which he sends off to me, which is like, when they show up, it's like Christmas. And so I get to go through it and all that. And I think maybe over the 6 issues that I've sent him off, that he's maybe asked me, or I maybe asked him 3 questions about his thumbnails, because once they're done, it's like, oh yeah, I see it. It's like, I don't see it any other way after that. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, he starts painting. So I've been through the thumbnail stage, and I just got the first page of the 6th book.
Oh, wow.
Week. So it looks amazing.
I bet. Yeah. That's cool.
But I don't know if you're familiar with the Necromantic book that came out last year in the middle of the plague. Mm-hmm. I'm sure almost no one saw it.
Well, Alexander talked about it, that's for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a ton of work in that, and I think it's a good story, but I'm a little biased. And we had great artists working on it and that. So that's something that came out that I always mention, because I don't know how many people saw it, because it was 2020 was a weird time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But now I'm actually putting together a few other things. I have a pitch that is sitting with a publisher now, that I don't know if you know Piotr Kowalski. I hope I pronounced that Polish name properly.
I'm afraid not. No.
Oh, well, he's done so much work. He's brilliant, and I was lucky to work with him on one of the Norse mythology stories.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's the one where they tricked, or they made a deal with a giant to build the wall around Valhalla.
Mm-hmm.
And he's tricked them, and he's going to actually get it done before they expect, and so they get Loki involved in there to save them, because he was the one who recommended trying to trick the giant in the first place.
Right.
But Piotr did a great job on that, and we were talking back and forth and stuff, and I said I would love to have him draw something in mind, and he said, well, what did you have in mind? And I said, I have a lot of stories that I've worked up synopses for and that. And he said, oh yeah, like what? And we talked about genres and stuff, and I pitched him a cyberpunk story, which he liked, which he loved. And he was doing he did up like a sketch of the characters, like if not the next day, for sure that week. And so we've got that sitting out with a publisher now, waiting to hear about that.
Cool.
But I remember going into a pitch meeting in LA with a film and television producer, and he was talking to me about the early some stuff I was pitching, because they were actually interested in Shame back then.
Okay.
But I was talking about a few things, and he at one point said, stop. And he said, you have too many ideas. Let's talk about these three that you brought up. So I have, as I say, too many ideas. and so I have other things that I'm talking to other people about, but they're not at quite as far along. They're not sitting with a publisher who's interested in them yet.
Right. Well, it sounds like you're busy, that's for sure.
Well, I think if you're a freelancer and you're not busy, you're in trouble, right?
Right, exactly. Well, Lovern, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
Because of the lack of the conventions and that, I'm not able to reach out to readers and that of the stuff, people that have seen that, and I would really like to hear back from people who have read the Shame series, or people that have read Necromantic, and like hear why they liked it or why they didn't. I don't think anybody's ever told me that they didn't like any of the books that they bought. So I'm guessing, with a comic, you can flip through it, and it would have to be pretty bad for you to be disappointed after you had flipped through it and that. So, but I do miss that. I would love to hear people like contact me on Facebook or something and just say, hey, I read Hell's Flaw and I thought this, or stuff like that. Just to have a little more of that conversation that I'm not getting at conventions.
Thanks to Lovern for the chat. You can discover more about Lovern on Twitter at LOVERN and on Facebook.com/LOVERN KINDZIERSKI. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.